Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back into KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the BYU Cougars. Exciting times in BYU athletics. It was an incredible year on the athletics front. And joining me now to talk about BYU athletics and this unique world in college athletics right now is BYU Advancement Vice President Keith Vorkink. And Keith, thanks for taking the time to join me today.
Happy to join you, Mitch. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I really appreciate you hopping on board here. And just for our listeners, too, that maybe aren't familiar when I say Advancement VP, we've talked before in the past, but what does your title, embody with your role within BYU as a school and then also on the athletics side as well?
Yeah, sure. This is a question I get a fair amount. The title Advancement Vice President doesn't really convey sort of the responsibilities that I carry. As a general description, I oversee most of the activities and responsibilities in organizations that have a significant touch to the world off campus. So that includes athletics. So athletics reports up to me. Tom Homo reports to me. But I also have responsibilities for BYU Broadcasting, BYU TV, for our alumni and external relations, our strategic communications, messaging, branding, and university relations, which is, VIP people, some of our church leadership. So the things where it connects deeply to the outside world reports up to me. And in this case, I work very closely with the athletics program.
And the athletics program right now is a big talking point in college basketball in particular right now. And I think there's a lot of, and I'm glad that you hopped on because there's a lot of, I think, inaccuracies. I mean, following BYU sports as close as I do, and just seeing the chatter that goes on, it's kind of crazy that people come up with stuff. And I got to imagine for you, it's even more crazy because you're so closely connected to the university and the athletic department. So I'm just curious, when it comes to NIL, what are some of the core principles around BYU and how they view NIL?
Well, you're exactly right, Mitch. This is a topic where it seems like everybody has a theory about what's happening here, and many of those aren't necessarily grounded in the truth. But people can have their own speculation. We do have, we have a strategy that working with Tom and President Reese and up our line that we've adopted in the presence of this new landscape of intercollegiate athletics, which allows student athletes to receive NIL. And that strategy is really founded on a handful of principles. The first principle, which is the most important to us, is while the university itself has, we're founded, supported, and guided by our sponsoring church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And there's a very tight governance and relationship with the church for the university. There is no funding of NIL through the church. There's no funding of the athletics program through the appropriation that the university receives from the church. Their revenues come from other streams, but not from any of that appropriation that comes from the church.
And so just to follow up on that, no funding from the church. Is there any role, though, that the church has when it comes to NIL? Do they give advice on how to handle these things? Because the numbers that get tossed around are sometimes inflated and pretty big, or do they give any sort of advice to the university and the athletic department?
It's a great question. And maybe what I would say is we sort of have three principles, and the no church funding or support is one of them. The other two are that we actually do engage in the NIL landscape. And the way we describe our engagement is we're competitive, but we're not the highest bidder. And I'll pause here for a moment. We have one more, but the church was very much involved in the vetting of that strategy. So the church is involved our governance provided, counsel and approval at a high level of how we wanted to approach it. We tend not to get, deep engagement, and Elder Gilbert's even said this in other settings. They're not vetting individual deals, in the NIL space. We'll give them updates on occasion, but they were very much involved, deeply involved in the establishment of that principle. The last principle we have this is athletics, but it ties to NIL, is we believe our competitive advantage, the strategy that we hang our hat in, is to get student athletes here that also buy into the mission of the university. In basketball, we believe that also includes buying into our coaching staff and what they bring to the table and the environment that BYU offers. We want to ensure that that interactions with student athletes understand and are interested in or embrace the environment, the mission of the university, the coaching staff, and not here just because of NIL contracts.
Just to follow up, you did see that, I think, this week with Yegor Demmin, when he was talking about his entry into the NBA, but he did clearly have an impact on his time at BYU this 1 year, talking about faith and God, and probably never would have thought his wildest dreams would be at BYU, but it clearly had an impact on him.
Yes, and so he's a great example of this, because last year there was a fair amount of discussion about the significant NIL contract that he entered into with the university. We haven't said, but others have said. Yeah. He had higher paid options other places, but he loved what Coach Young brought to the table, and what environment, what culture he created around the basketball program. And you heard at his press conference announcing that he was going into the draft what kind of impact that had on him. And to me, that's a manifestation of one case of success when we've done it right for the individual student athlete. And we also believe this strategy can lead to being successful competitively. We're trying to win, too. We're trying to do multiple things. And Yegor was a great example of someone who had great skill and talent, but also came here because of not just the money, but because of the basketball environment, the mission environment, and those two things work together for success.
Talking with BYU Advancement VP Keith Vorkink here on KSL News Radio, and this is a very unique time, too, Keith, with revenue sharing on the horizon. There still has to be, the settlement has to be voted on or signed off on by the judge. It was taking place this week. Right. But your thoughts on revenue sharing and BYU's approach to revenue sharing and how how BYU is viewing this potential upcoming landscape in college athletics.
Yeah, that's a question that every single athletic department is wrestling with, and Tom's done a really thoughtful job about organizing an implementation in the event that the House case is settled as we anticipated to be settled, or at least the way it's being discussed to be settled, so that we will participate in it. The same principles that apply to NIL, it's the strategy. Again, we won't have any church funding. We'll engage in this case, we could insert revenue sharing competitively, but, it's not going to be just trying to, pay the highest amount to be the highest bidder, because we want student athletes to come here with an understanding, a willingness, an embracing of our distinctive mission, the environment, and those sorts of things. So yeah, we'll figure out a way that let's assume for a second that the House settles as currently described. then universities will have somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $21 million of revenue share. And that's permissible. It's not required, but up to that amount. We'll participate what we would describe as competitively in it. May not be at the highest amount, but it will be a part of our strategy, hoping still not to take off the table the stuff that's most important to us.
Has there been, just to follow up on that, has there been a push from the Big 12, to say that, kind of advising all the institutions to try to get competitive to that $20.5 million mark?
I think there's been counsel. There has to be competitive for sure. This will put a strain on athletic departments' budgets, and so but they understand that at the conference level that lack of not being competitive in that space could be problematic.
Yep.
And there's not been for us a sense like you have to be at the maximum, but they do. They're hoping, they're providing solutions, or at least recommending solutions that can allow the universities and the conference to be able to be competitive.
Last thing for you, Keith, and appreciate the time here. I'm curious, what's the role that, because with revenue sharing, there's a lot of talk about the collectives and how that will work. With the Royal Blue Collective that's, connected to BYU, how will that relationship continue? What's it like now, and how will that continue in the revenue sharing era?
Well, that's a good question, and one I don't think we know all of the answers to. What I can say is there's governance right now around how tight the relationship between a collective and the athletic department can be. I'm not suggesting there's no relationship. There's, among other things, a corporate sponsorship relationship that allows them to be the official collective of the athletic department. We do anticipate that if the House is settled, at least some function, if not the majority of, would be allowed to move in-house. Does that mean the Royal Blue Collective goes away? Not necessarily, but perhaps. That's why it's hard to know exactly how all this sorts out once the House settles. There won't be a formal preclusion of collectives, but if the House case is settled, there'll be some third-party validation that will have an impact on how collectives have been functioning in a pretty significant way, and so we'll see what sorts out if that's settled, and what impact these policies and regulations would have on the current state of collectives.
These are fascinating times. I could go on and on with you, Keith, about this stuff. It's really fascinating, and you're in the thick of it all. But I know you're a busy guy, and really appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain to our listeners what's going on and give the BYU perspective in all the noise, and really, again, appreciate the time.
I appreciate it, Mitch, because we have a strategy that's a little different than most universities, and so I think right now there's many people out there who kind of struggle to get it. And you're giving us a chance to at least tell our story, and perhaps as we do this more and more, people will try to understand. We're not, everybody can have their own strategy. Sure. We've decided this is ours, but it's an atypical one, and you're giving us a chance to at least help inform people on the way we're trying to do this.
He's Keith Vorkink, Advancement VP here at BYU, and again, appreciate the time spent with him here on KSL.